Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our new edition of Is This Pilot Actually Good? Where we go through it. We look at first episodes of iconic shows and really try to figure out, did they have their you-know-what together from the start? Did they require a period of growth and development? This one is fun because we are really jumping in the Wayback Machine here to the very first episode of NCIS, a show that is nearing its 400th episode.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And if you've been at the channel for a while, then you know how much we love NCIS.
Yeah, it's a show we have a lot of fun doing videos about, but, we've really only done videos about recent seasons of it, so we're really going back here to the days of Sasha Alexander, of, a smaller overall cast, it felt like. No McGee at this point.
No McGee, so weird.
It is really weird, but we're going to talk about this episode, what worked in it, what didn't work as well in it, and if you do like this video, remember, subscribe, give us a like, hit that notification bell, because we're definitely going to have a lot more NCIS Season 18 coverage before too long, and we just don't know at the moment when it's even going to start.
Okay, so for these series, we like to give full disclosure of how much of this show we've actually seen, if we haven't seen any of it. So I have never seen this pilot. This is the first time I'm ever seeing it. I got into NCIS a little bit later on, nearing sort of the end of when Cote de Pablo was on and past that. So I have not seen this pilot. This is my first time.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces from some of the earlier seasons, but this is my first time seeing the pilot all the way through as well, and I think I got into NCIS just a little bit before you did, but I wasn't around in the early seasons as well, so it is a fun experiment to go back and sort of bear witness to how it all began.
Yeah, and so I also like to start out these videos by talking about the theme song, because, we've done Friends and talked about Breaking Bad and some other shows that have these kind of sort of more iconic theme songs, and NCIS, for me, the theme song was, when I first started watching the show, I was like, okay, it's good, and now it's so stuck in my head that every time the show comes on, I'm dancing, it's in my head, and I really like it. So for me, it's a theme song that grew over time on me.
Sneaky good theme song.
Yeah,
underrated theme song.
Yep.
It's not the most complicated in the world, but I feel like if you watched crime TV on a regular basis, you could hear this out of context. You could immediately recognize, oh, this is NCIS. I don't know why it sounds different to me in the later seasons on some level than what it does in this pilot. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, no, I think it changed a little bit. It was like the beginning of it sounded the same, sort of a little bit in the middle sounded the same, and then it kind of like changed as it was going to the end, because I noticed that too while I was watching. I was kind of like, all right, here's the theme song. And I was like, wait a second, I'm not kind of bopping the same way that I was. There's something that's different in it.
That's really kind of a microcosm for, to me, the entire pilot, where it feels similar to the NCIS we have today. We have a lot of elements of it that are very much the same, but then we have some other elements that are very, very different. I enjoyed watching the pilot, but it felt a lot like I was sort of watching a little bit more of a thriller as opposed to a crime procedural, where it was a little bit more action-oriented. It felt like it was more sort of about one through line throughout the episode, and we didn't have like these little comedic runners like we kind of do in modern NCIS.
Yeah, and a lot of it, of course, was taking place on these planes, which, nowadays NCIS is a little more in the field and here and there and whatever, but it was actually quite cool to have a pilot that was mostly sort of in this smaller space.
It felt very much like they had a focus story they wanted to tell, just so that you could kind of get used to the sort of work NCIS does, because until this pilot, and this is something that's really even joked about in the pilot, the majority of people out there probably don't know what NCIS is.
I loved that. That opening scene with like the TSA guy where he was kind of like, are you new on the job thing? And explaining what NCIS was. I thought that was brilliant, and it was absolutely needed for all of us out here who's like, I don't know what this is. here's a funny little moment to kind of explain it to all of us of what this actually, I thought that was really smart. I liked it. It stuck well.
Yeah, I think the only exposure people probably had was the NCIS kind of kicked off as a backdoor pilot within JAG. So I guess if you saw JAG, maybe you got like a tiny taste of it, but I'm sure producers of NCIS were aware there were probably a lot of people watching this who never saw anything with JAG or anything else, so they give you an explanation, they give it to you in kind of a funny way, so it's sort of like, okay, you guys are the federal agent underdogs, the misfits who not even the other organizations want to take seriously even though you're good at what you do.
I loved that they had all the different organizations, and you've got FBI in here, and everybody's in here sort of jockeying for jurisdiction over this. We've seen that a little bit in shows, but this was really interesting because, of course, we got to see Fernell and some other people, and sort of that idea that NCIS is kind of like not being taken as seriously, and they kind of have to do a little trickery to get their feet in there, even though, you know, this should be something that they should be looking at. I really like that. I thought that was cool.
I think that part of it was cool because it gives you that underdog vibe. I think the setup, I find it very, very funny, given where we are now on NCIS, that our setup with Gibbs is basically him working on his boat, which we continue to joke about in 2020. This man, we may talk a lot about him changing. He's still making boats in his basement.
Yeah, so of course there's lots of discussion. We're not going to go too much into the further seasons because this is only about the pilot, but there has been tons of discussion over the past couple seasons of Gibbs is going to be changing, and he has been changing, and it hasn't been big changes. It's small changes, which is stuff that I really enjoy because it does show me that at any age you're able to change even just little things about yourself, and I think that that's really cool and I like it. So, but they've also said, the showrunners have said that he's still going to be the same cowboy that he's always been, and we see that in this pilot. He's still making his boats, he's still got his rules, even though some of them are changing. That whole scene at the end when he figures out who it is and they pull out a rifle and he's just spraying all these bullets and Gibbs doesn't move. He's just all around him, doesn't flinch, doesn't move, nothing, and just shoots him dead. I was like, okay. So that is still a thing that's happening today. He is still a cowboy. That all the roots of Gibbs are still there.
I gotta say, I found that scene with the shooting really weird because it's like, how is this guy
crazy?
How is this guy so bad of a shot? Like, really, Gibbs is right there. This was the ultimate. Okay, all of the villains are idiots and they are not capable of pulling anything off. That was the only. I could not get over that scene and just how bad of a shot this guy was. But
he was a bad shot in a small space. Yeah. But it was. I think it was important because they did have to kind of set up what kind of person Gibbs is when he's under fire. And I thought that they did a decent job with that. This show is a little bit fantastical. So, I mean, It is what it is.
You're going to get some cheesiness here and there. And we will certainly talk about some cheesiness that existed within this pilot because there's a few moments of it. But, you know, to me, the most surprising thing about watching the pilot was I really actually sort of felt like it was a two-lead show in a lot of ways, where I kind of associate NCIS with just Gibbs, but I feel like Caitlin Todd almost has the same amount of screen time in this episode as Gibbs. Like, you really kind of see both of their perspectives throughout.
I have never had a chance to see this character before, but I love Sasha Alexander. I loved her on Rizzoli and Isles. That was the first thing I'd ever seen her in, and I just fell in love with her. She's just fun, and she plays these kind of cool, quirky but strong characters, so it was cool to see that she was doing that over here as well. But yeah, it did feel like this was sort of a two-lead show. I liked how they kind of were having a little bit of this almost like, is this gonna be Gibbs's love interest? We don't know. And then of course they had the fun twist at the end where Gibbs gets into a car with another woman who is not identified as anybody at this point, and gives her a kiss and they drive away. And I was like, okay, I really like this now. That was a very cool twist. where this isn't where we're going with it, because that's kind of a trope that we see all the time on lots of shows, including this one. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they? I was just like, okay, they won't.
Yeah, I
or at least as far
that.
as I know. I don't know a lot about this Kate character.
Yeah, I really think that they set her up for the most part fairly well in this episode. You get a sense of who she works for, how she ends up becoming a part of NCIS, and also the sort of people Gibbs kind of looks for. He kind of wants these sort of rogues who don't really belong anywhere else. That's kind of at the top of his criteria, which is kind of funny. Gibbs has so many rules, and yet he wants rule breakers on this. Does he think he can fix them? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because he is also a rule breaker. Even when he, is claiming he's not really breaking his rules, he kind of does sometimes. And now we've seen him burn rules. So, I mean, it's true because even in modern day, we have Torres on this team who breaks every single rule that has ever been in play in the entirety of the universe. So he really does pull in people who are not going to follow the rules.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the things that don't age great about the pilot? Because I have a few here. Okay. Number one, the Kate jockstrap just conversation. Let's just set that on fire and never speak of it again. I do not feel like you would have that conversation in 2020.
No, and I also feel like it wasn't even needed then. Like, I understand that in this type of job, women are sort of feeling like maybe they have to be like a man to do this job, but that's not always the case. It might be the case in some ways, but I didn't think she needed to sort of compare herself to a man right away to be like, I'm as good as you. She just is as good as you, and she's showing it through her work. So I think that they could have, set that on fire.
Yeah.
The other thing I didn't like, but this is just for anybody who doesn't know, I'm a licensed funeral director. I've worked in the morgue plenty of times, numerous hours.
I know where this is going already.
Gibbs getting on that morgue table is beyond disgusting. And listen, like as I've said, I've worked in a morgue. Morgues are typically very sterile. We do our best, lots of bleach, cleaning everything. You couldn't pay me enough money to get on a table that has dead people on it. You don't know what's going on there, and where they are, they're not even embalming these bodies. These bodies are still carrying whatever's happening from the murder, poisons or diseases or any of the, no, don't eat in the morgue, which I've also seen going on shows, and don't lie on the tables or touch them without your gloves. It is just my own pet peeve. It is disgusting, and I didn't know where they were kind of going with that, except to be like, ha, he's so funny, he's gonna sleep on a morgue table. I'm gonna tell you, I've worked some long hours. I have never been like that tired.
No.
I'll sleep on the floor somewhere outside the morgue. Nothing with the morgue is gonna touch me.
Let's go back in time, bring Jimmy Palmer on NCIS even earlier, and then have Jimmy Palmer come in and just yank Gibbs out of there, because I'm not a licensed funeral director. I'm not anything associated with the funeral industry. Let me tell you.
So gross.
I still would have never done that in a million years. Like, it's like, Gibbs, what are you doing, man? Like, what's going on here? Yeah, that...
Abby has a futon under her desk. Go there. Sleep at your desk in the chair. Like anything that doesn't have someone who was dead, has a disease, maybe has deterioration going on. No.
Yeah. The only other thing, and this is not, I don't know if I can say this ages badly, it's just a different time period, is it really caught me off guard seeing a sort of replica Bush on the pilot.
Yeah.
This is not a political statement. It's just that I feel like now, with how divisive the political world is, I don't think NCIS would model any of their presidents after a real life president now. I know, it was a little bit different even just a few years ago when you had Michelle Obama part of the show, but I don't think they would do this now. And so it just surprised me that they were doing a story, especially given, when NCIS first came on the air, that you're actually going to have a story with a sort of replica of an actual president, and there's a lot of danger going on around them.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that. I mean, I can't really name a lot of other shows that sort of actually depict real presidents. It's usually we have President Morgan Freeman, kind of
Yeah,
thing,
no.
right? It's just a random president thrown in here. So, yeah, that was interesting. Interesting choice.
It was a really that caught me off guard, but I think what this pilot does really, really well is it does give you a good insight into some characters who are still pretty similar to who they were back then. Like we talked about Gibbs. I feel like Ducky, for what we see of him in the pilot, this is still the same Ducky who is on the show now. He hasn't changed that much.
No, he hasn't. He's still telling his stories, and Gibbs is like, all right, later, man, later. Like, we get it. We know what's coming. I like that he's still the storyteller, and that was really cool. I like that. It was interesting to see how different Fornell was. Now he's sort of this guy who comes in who's a little more laid back and joking around. Fornell PI. It was actually a little jarring for me to see him like that, because I actually haven't seen him like that. I've seen him like he is now, where I'm like, yeah, Vernell, he's a good time for Nell. And it's like, ooh, he is not good time for Nell at all in the pilot.
I want to retroactively nickname new Fernell After Hours, because I feel like, it's a different Fernell for sure than what we have here. And Abby is still pretty similar, I think, to the Abby who you see at the end of Polly Barrett's time on the show. I don't think they really did that much to change her, and really she didn't have that much to do in this episode anyway. It was just sort of like, okay, let's have a conversation with you and Tony. And I think Tony is the one character who I don't really think that they had fully figured him out yet in this episode. Like, I can't really pin down, at least from this episode, who Tony DiNozzo really is.
Yeah, he was really taking a bit of a backseat to Kate, who felt like she was sort of a co-lead going on with Gibbs. We didn't really learn that much about him. He was there and he was working, and he had a couple of, one-liners, and then that was all we really got. So it did feel kind of like they just didn't really have their footing with him yet. We didn't really learn a lot about Abby yet, just enough that it sort of feels like, her character didn't really develop a lot from then to when we left her. We got to know her, but there was no real change over the years, which is a little bit disappointing. And I've said that before, sort of coming to the near of the end of her arc on the show, that I would have liked to have seen a little bit of development with her, meaning change with her, that she's just not the same person for, 15 years. I mean, nobody is, right? Even Gibbs is changing a little bit, and it would have been nice to see a little bit more going on with her as well.
I feel like they just got so caught up in like the physical aesthetic of Abby, that she has to look this way all the time, that they didn't put a lot into trying to adapt that character, and that to me remains a little bit of a disappointment. And the pilot in general, I'm not going to say it's one of my favorite pilots ever, but I think it's solid. I think it does a good job of sort of setting everything up. It would make me excited to watch more. And the history of NCIS is just interesting in itself, because at first, like, this show wasn't immediately like a juggernaut hit. It took a little bit of time to get going, but kind of around when it started to enter syndication, it was just enormous at that point. And I think it's because of episodes like this. They give you nuggets of these characters, you get to know the characters, you root for them as underdogs, and I think because of that, it's so easy to dive into this world.
Yeah, and I mean, Mark Harmon really stole this episode. It was some really good character development for just one episode. I mean, we really kind of got an idea of who he is, and some of that he is this cowboy, that he does have the routine. We saw him start the episode working on his boat. We saw the end of the episode with him working on his boat, and that there is kind of the end. He mentioned, of course, his rules, and we actually got quite a lot with him, which, of course, he is the star of the show, so it makes sense. I think they did enough that this would make me want to watch the next episode, and that's sort of what I use as sort of the barometer of what, is this a good pilot? Is this not a good pilot? Would somebody have to talk me in to be like, hey, give it a couple more episodes, see, it just needs a little bit of time. This episode did enough that I would want to watch the next episode.
I think for me it's the same thing. I would definitely want to watch a little bit more. I would want to see where you go with some of these characters. I like that it feels different than every other crime procedural kind of did at that point. You're really seeing a lot of these people out on the job. There's a little bit of humor in there. They're taking their job seriously, but we get to see sort of the responses by other people to them. And yeah, I like this pilot. I like some of the characters. I like how it's structured. It's still remarkable to me, though, that, we're talking about the early 2000s here, and now it's 2020 and we're in another decade and there's still no sign that NCIS is ending anytime soon.
Yeah, it's really crazy because we've been doing a lot of these series where, most of the shows that we've been doing aren't airing anymore. And they've been, some of them have been around for have started and ended when NCIS is still going on, like Game of Thrones, or Breaking Bad or something like that. And NCIS is still happening. It's so crazy to me. Yeah, no end in sight right now.
Here's the craziest thing. You could put 2 Game of Thrones in terms of the numbers of seasons into NCIS and it would still be shorter than NCIS.
Crazy.
But, all right, well, let's hear from you guys. What did you think about the NCIS Season 1, Episode 1, the very first episode? Did you think it was actually good? What did you not like about it? Let us know in the comments. And if you do like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and support us further by checking that link in the description to the store. And we'll see you here next time.